All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So, today's lesson is going to be about Washington's administration and the start of our new government under the Constitution and to see if this is going to work. Okay. So, we're going to analyze the team that Washington had in his cabinet. So, the first, cabinet, first administration, we're going to look at them. Who were they? Why did Washington pick them and things like that. And then we're going to examine Alexander Hamilton's plan to get rid of the national debt. This was a big thing, okay? And then we're going to create an argument on why the Ninth and Tenth Amendment are so vague. I honestly think I'm going to change that question at the very end, so just be aware of that, okay? So let's go ahead and get to your warm up. All right, so the question I'm asking you is this: what do you think this artist is trying to say about, like Americans, not just Washington, but Americans who want to, stretch out and move out west, go to the frontier area? Um, what do you think this artist is trying to say? What's stopping them? What's out there? Okay, so it's not that hard. It's pretty easy warm up question. It makes me laugh every time I see it. Um, but yeah, so go ahead, pause the video, write your response because we're moving on in three, two, one. All right. The summer of 1789, Congress created three executive departments, and one office for the president to help him out. Because again, the president can't do everything himself. So they made the Department of State, Department of War, which was Henry Knox, who was a uh, trusted guy of Washington. Washington really trusted him. Department of Treasury. Okay. And then we have the Office of Attorney General. So this is like the top lawyer in the country. And Washington wanted Edmund Randolph for the job. Okay. Now, Henry Knox and Edmund Randolph are very good at their job. Okay. They are really, really good. And every part that says department, you call them the Secretary of State, Secretary of War, Secretary of Treasury, things like that. So Washington was allowed to choose. Okay, so Washington said, I want the best people for each of these jobs. And Henry Knox, Edmund Randolph, they'd be perfect for war and attorney general. And it's like, okay, what about Secretary of State and Secretary of the Treasury? And he goes, I got the two guys. They may not get along, but they are the best. They are some of the best minds. Okay. So vice president, if you don't know, is John Adams, who was another pretty smart guy. So Lincoln didn't, or Lincoln, sorry, Washington didn't have to choose him. Okay. He was already in his cabinet. So for Secretary of State, Lincoln chose Thomas Jefferson. And when it came to Treasury, money, how to handle the money situation, which was a big undertaking, Washington knew there's only one guy for this job, and that was Alexander Hamilton. Okay. And then Congress said, okay, we got that down. Boom, executive office, done. Let's move on to the judicial branch. So they needed to set up the Supreme Court. That's what they did. They organized it and they were like, okay, who would be a great Chief Justice? Some guy who knows the law, knows the Constitution, and can basically decide, like, hey, does this thing, law, whatever, violate someone's rights? And they were thinking like, yeah, John Jay would be a good choice. And Washington said, yeah, John Jay. So he becomes our first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So the first cabinet, the first Chief Justice are the best people at that time for the job. The best. All right. So if you remember from the last lesson, remember when I told you Madison, Washington, and then promised states like Massachusetts and Virginia and some of that, we are going to, if you ratify this Constitution, we will start a Bill of Rights. We will get these amendments down. And then those states ratified it. Well, now it came to the point where, hey, you got to keep your promise. We're men of our word, so we're going to do it. So that's also what they did in the summer of 1789. That first Congress was really busy. So they proposed some amendments to the Constitution. And on December 7, 1791, the Bill of Rights are ratified. The Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments to our Constitution. The first 8 amendments protect your rights as a citizen. You won't have to write them down or anything, but I will go over them slightly um, when later on in this video. Uh, if you have me for a government class, I will we are going to break those down and what do they mean, and we're talking about court cases that apply to each one of those, and the myths that you guys may have heard and things like that. So um, if you have me for government, be prepared for that. If you don't, you'll have me next year for that. Okay. The Ninth Amendment is unique. It says, it's very vague. It says that people have other rights that are not mentioned or listed in the Constitution. Because again, you have to remember, these guys who wrote it, they were smart. They knew that they can't tell the future. They knew they didn't know everything. So they left the interpretation pretty vague, saying basically whatever we didn't think of, um, that rights go to the people. The 10th Amendment basically says any power not specified that to be given to the federal government goes to the states. So a great example would be like, driving a car. The federal government doesn't issue your license, the states do. Now, why is that? That's because the 10th Amendment. The the founding fathers didn't know about cars. No one would have thought about a car. So that's why they said, okay, any rights not mentioned going to the government, federal government, goes to the states. Now that those promises were done, now Washington, it's like, okay, let's tackle this big problem going on in our country, and that's our debt. Because remember, while they were trying to get the Constitution together, the Articles of Confederation was still going on, and our country was getting more and more into debt. Every state was getting more and more into debt. So Alexander Hamilton, that guy you see right there, the guy on the $10 bill, he had a plan to pay off all the debts, right? He wanted the federal government to accept all responsibility from the state's outstanding debts. In other words, he's saying, okay, every state, listen up. The federal government, we are ready and responsible, and we want to take your debt. We want to, whoever you owe money to, we want you to tell them, hey, the federal government, the United States government is going to be paying you, not us. So whatever we owe you, they will pay. Now, to a lot of states, that sounded great, right? Just think of like if you owed, a lot of money, like over $5,000, and somebody, like your mom or your uncle says, "Hey, just tell whoever you owe money to that I'll pay it." You know, how quickly would you be like, "Heck yeah, thank you, yeah, yeah, sure, no problem. I'll tell them." You know, Now, I've had some students in the past go, well, no, I would never do that. I would never do that. Well, that's the thing. Some states didn't want that. Some states didn't really owe much money. So they were like, why, uh, why should we, do this? Because, we don't really owe money. In fact, some states actually had some money. And they're like, why? Why should we do this? What's your angle there, Hamilton? His plan was to create a national bank to basically manage the country's money. What he saw was like you can't really have a dollar for New York, Delaware, Connecticut, Maine, North Carolina, Georgia. It's just too confusing. And then the exchange rate and stuff like that, he's like, no, no, no. We need a unified dollar. So if you get a dollar from New York that's federally issued by the government, you can go to any state and still spend that dollar because it's all the same dollar. And that's what he was trying to do. So people like Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and their little groups, especially the Anti-Federalists, they didn't like the idea because they were just like, well, it makes the government powerful. Because if we give them our debt, then they have stuff over us, and then he's going to create a bank, and then the government's going to be making buku amount of bucks, so they're going to be powerful. And besides, there's nothing in the Constitution that says the government can make a bank. It's not under their enumerated powers. And Hamilton's like, sorry, yeah, it is. And he says, look under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, and it says that they have that power. The government has the power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper. And he goes, we're not scamming anyone. Okay. We are going to pay off the debt. And this is something we need to get out of this extreme national debt because it's not just about one state or two, it's about our country because we are now a United States. So one problem has one state happens for all of us. So he tried to explain this bank would help collect taxes, make things easier for them. It would really help regulate trade and provide for the common defense. So if the Navy, Army needed money to get things, we need a new boat. Fine, let's get a new boat. If Congress approves it, hey, there's the money. Instead of trying to scrounge and try to look for money, no, we already have it. So that's what he was trying to do. Now, the banking idea passed, but there was like stipulations from Southern congressmen, and there was like a backroom deal made in all reality. Hamilton, Jefferson, these guys, the Southern State People's Congressmen, they basically asked that the capital be moved from Philadelphia somewhere more southern because they didn't like that the capital was way up in Pennsylvania. They wanted it more south, somewhere down near where it was closer to them a little bit too. So the District of Columbia was chosen. Actually, George Washington picked where he wanted the White House and things like that. He was like, "This land looks great," and it just so happened to be right between Virginia and Maryland. So the land was donated by the states. And said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, no problem. You want to build the capital in this area? Sure." So that's the thing. Okay, they were southern states and they felt that same way. We want the capital here. And that's where it still stands to this day. Now, the first big problem that popped up during Washington administration was the Whiskey Rebellion. A large tax was placed on whiskey, and it really ticked off the Western farmers because a lot of times those guys, when they have excess crops, if it's going to go bad, they try to use it, and they would make like whiskey and things like that. Um, so that's how they made their little extra money. And now all of a sudden, here's a tax on it. It's like, well, what the heck? So they felt attacked. So what they did is they attacked tax collectors. They would tar and feather them. And if you don't know what that is, basically the tar you see if you ever saw a road being created, that sticky dark stuff that's on the road, that was boiling hot. And they would put it on a person, the tax collector, and throw feathers on it. And so when the person tried to get that tar off, they would have to wait till it hardened. And then when they took off the tar, it would tear off their skin. So yeah, it was really, really bad. They would rob mail. Now I've heard a lot of students in the past go, "What's wrong with that? That's nothing. That's stupid." Here's the thing: you have to remember these people lived out way in the country, and the only time they got news was either through the newspaper or letters from relatives and stuff like that. But either way, it had to be delivered to them. You know, you have to remember this is the 1790s, so news traveled slow and it went by mail. So if somebody robbed the mail, destroyed the mail, those people had no idea what's going on in the rest of the world, and they're losing communication with their family members and stuff like that. And also, those people who were upset about this tax, they destroyed the stills, the devices to create whiskey. You know, they destroyed it. If you paid your taxes on the whiskey, they were like, "Hey, Ted, we heard you were paying the taxes and stuff," and they would come by and they would like take an axe to the steel and break it and destroy it. You know, so Washington's like, no, no, this is not going to be like another Shays rebellion. You know, we're not going to have this kind of crap. We put a tax. It was passed by Congress. It's legal. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean you can throw a hissy fit. So he sends 13,000 troops to go and destroy this rebellion. And he does. And this kind of made some people kind of like, oh, Washington's so mean. But the thing is, he wanted to show them just because you don't like something, if it's done legally, you have to accept it. If you don't like it, talk to your congressman, talk to your representative, but don't go around try to take matters in your own hands. You know, you're not a bunch of vigilantes. And if you think you are, I'm going to bring down the hammer. So, Washington does 2 terms as president, so 8 years. And people still wanted him to run again. And he was like, you know what? No, 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 no. Because the thing is, we just got rid of a king. Why am I going to stay on longer past 2 terms, past 8 years? I'd be like a king all over again. So he's like, no, no. So he gave a farewell address and he warned the people in our country about the dangers of political parties. He is the only president to not join a political party and still be elected as president. No president has ever, since Washington, has been elected without joining a political party. And he just saw that the tear between the two, the Federalists and Anti-Federalists, how they just butted heads and just argued about every little thing. And Washington was like, political parties are going to ruin us, and you, the people, you guys need to realize this. Now, once word spread that Washington stepped down, there was an election and John Adams won, and Washington turned over power to him. A bunch of leaders around the world were like, wait, what? Are you serious? No, no, you're joking me. And it's like, no. Washington served 8 years as president and he relinquished his power. So a lot of kings and leaders around the world were like, you can do that? Who does that? Who gives up power? Did the people revolt? Did the people not want him anymore? No, no, they wanted him to run for president again for another 4 years. What? And he gave up that power? Is he a special kind of stupid? I mean, what the heck? So it just baffled these kings and these dictators. It just baffled their minds. Or these emperors, it's just like, how could somebody step away from power? It's like, wow. Okay. But it showed the world that we can have a peaceful transition of power in this country. So maybe this constitution and democracy is actually something that works, you know? So, like I said, John Adams becomes the next president, and he inherited some tension between America and France. See, the thing is, right before um, Washington left as president, he made a treaty with Britain. So, the United States and Britain are now cool with each other, and this upset France because France and Britain still hate each other, and France was hoping that we would still hate Britain just like them. And France is like, dude, you guys fought a war against them, and they held you down for so many years and suppressed you, and you know didn't treat you like citizens, and now you're friends with them. And it's like, well, yeah, we need to start making trade with them, start being you know friendly with everyone in the countries around the world. And so this upset France because they felt betrayed by us, because they helped us out during the revolution. So they started capturing some of our American ships, and we had a so-called war. It was undeclared war. It wasn't an official war, but we were fighting with them for a little bit. And this continued until 1800, when we finally came to negotiations and um, became friendly again. So it took some time. Now, really quickly, you don't have to write this stuff down. That's why I put it in white for you. But these are the amendments, okay? The first one says you have the right to religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of people to peacefully assemble, so to like to march and stuff like that. And if you have a problem with the government, you can say you have a problem with them without fear of them arresting you and things like that. The Second Amendment says a well regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the rights of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The right to, to guns, to keep them and stuff like that. This one's very a hot topic um, amendment, which in government class we usually have like a class discussion and things like that about because it's not just cut and dry. There's a lot of things to it, and some groups that really like it or really don't like the Second Amendment, they tend to pick at it. Okay. Third Amendment basically says a soldier can't stay in your house without your permission. Okay. The Fourth Amendment is really, really deep. There's a lot of stuff in there, but basically, your possessions, your anything physical, even your privacy, which is not mentioned there, but it's been later adapted into it by the Supreme Court, that the you need a search warrant for it. Okay, that the police, the authorities need probable cause. They just can't jump in and say we need this and this and that unless there's certain circumstances like probation and things like that. But again, the this will be explained when you get into government class. Again, Fifth Amendment is a big one. There's a lot of good stuff. So there's like you can't be charged for the exact same crime twice. Like if you rob something on January 1st, 2024, someplace, you can't go to jail for it. Go to court, go to jail, get out, and then they arrest you for that robbery on January 1st, 2024. They can't do that. If you robbed again as soon as you got out, that's another thing. But they can't arrest you for the same crime twice. Um, you have to go to court before the government can take your life, your freedom, or your property. You have to go through the process of law, things like that. The sixth one says basically you have a right to a speedy and fair trial and a public trial. So people can go and watch your trial, your family, neighbors, strangers, to see that, hey, everything is done properly and that you got a fair trial, you know. And same thing about calling to witnesses to um, go for you and to cross examine witnesses who said they saw you do something. The Seventh Amendment, basically, that you have a jury trial. You have people who about your same age, in the same community, stuff like that. You know that they are your jury. No excessive bails for the Eighth Amendment, nor cruel and unusual punishments, so they can't torture you, things like that. And again, the Ninth Amendment, um, the rights not mentioned, anything that's not really mentioned goes to you, the people. And number 10, anything that's not specifically said the power of the government, federal government has, then it goes to the states. And that's, also what's whatever is said in the Constitution. Okay. All right. So here's my question to you. Remember, Washington had an all-star group of people helping him out. Do you think our country would have survived if he didn't have the best? Let's just say he hired some of his best friends, his like drinking buddies and some of that. It's guys who didn't really know how the government worked and, just, hey, Washington, I need a job. And, he gave them Secretary of State, even though they have no idea what that job does or what's its purpose. So, do you think our country would have survived if we didn't have that all star group? Or do you think, no, 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 we would have survived? We had the Constitution, we had the Bill of Rights, we would have been fine. Tell me what you think. What do you think? Okay. The writing prompts on the bottom. I believe our country wouldn't have survived with that all star cast, no cabinet because and explain. Okay. So, uh, it's a bit of a bug right now. So, with that being said, guys, you take care, you be safe, and I'll see you guys later. Okay.